It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Eric has the morning off. I am here, though. The big news overnight, in fact, I woke up to it, and so I have scanned the entire 49-page ruling from the U.S. Court of International Trade. I keep saying the International Court of Trade. I'm giving you the wrong impression. It's the U.S. Court of International Trade. It's a federal court, and they exist for trade issues. And so the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled on Wednesday night that President Donald Trump overstepped his authority over tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Said the Constitution assigns Congress the exclusive powers to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, and to regulate commerce with foreign nations. The court opined the question in the two cases before the court to whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 delegates these powers to the president in the form of authority to impose unlimited tariffs on goods from nearly every country in the world. The court does not read the IEEPA to confer such unbounded authority and sets aside the challenged tariffs imposed thereunder, the court continued. The Trump administration has appealed the court's decision. This is from Fox News, by the way. The panel did not waste time in its decision and bypass the plaintiff's preliminary request for a temporary injunction to get straight to the merits, vacating the tariffs and permanently enjoining them from enforcement. The court holds, for the foregoing reasons, that the IEEPA does not authorize any of the worldwide retaliatory or trafficking tariff orders. The worldwide and retaliatory tariff orders exceed the authority granted to the president by the IEEPA to regulate importation by means of tariffs. The panel wrote, the trafficking tariffs failed because they do not deal with the threats set forth in those particular orders. I don't know specifically what that means. I don't know if the judges are saying that the trafficking tariffs don't deal with the threats. That what you're saying is, since things are being snuck across your border by criminals, that we are going to punish you with tariffs. I think that's what they're saying. It's not as if the country itself is bringing it over, but that's a guess on that. Again, it's a lot of it you probably have to ask the judges on this. Of course, the administration has immediately appealed. What I found interesting was a couple of things. First off, what they say is, and reading the IEEPA, the court is right. They don't say anywhere in there that the president can use tariffs. It doesn't say it. And you have seen the administration come out and say, yeah, but Nixon used it and was able to put tariffs on, even though the court goes through that and explains when Nixon put the tariffs on, it was for a specific reason, and it was said to be temporary. And according to the court, the tariffs actually never went into effect. And they used a different law. That's a different law. The other thing that was brought up is the fact of the trade law from 1962. I saw Charlie Kirk, for example, said, well, obviously, the president can increase tariffs under the 1962 Trade Act. Well, they didn't use that act. They used a different law. And that was even explained by a couple of legal experts saying, under that law, for example, that's why under that law, the steel tariffs and aluminum tariffs remained because they used the 1962 law and went through the process that's required under that law from Congress. And that law makes it so the president alone can't do it. He has to go to the Commerce Department. The Commerce Department does an investigation, find out if there's unfair trading practices, and then the Commerce Department comes back and says, okay, yeah, they're involved in this, and we're putting tariffs on them because of that, the suggested tariffs. The point the court was trying to make is the president can't do it alone under the law that they were following, or said to be following. The interesting thing is where they say even if, and this to me is the gotten my interest the most on it, even if the IEEPA law said that the president can use tariffs, the court said it would still be unconstitutional under that law. I don't know why. Well, they were making the case that that Congress cannot advocate their responsibility and give it to another branch. But isn't that what they did in the 1962 law, would be my question for them, for the members of the court. So all the tariffs except the automobile tariffs and the aluminum and steel tariffs, there might be a couple of others that went through the other law, they can stand. But here they can't. Now, you had Stephen Miller, you had another representative saying, these are rogue judges. That would be a different thing than calling the district judges rogue judges, or saying the district judges have gone beyond it, because this court only exists for international trade issues. That's why they exist. So that would be a tough one. Where this is going to end up, I don't know. How the appeals court will look at it, how the Supreme Court will look at it, I don't know. I've scanned the entire, when I woke up to come into work, 10 o'clock is when I saw this news. And so during the show, I've been scanning, during every commercial break, scanning the actual decision that was made. And I haven't yet attached all the different precedent that the judges used for their justification for what they did. Now, the stock market went up immediately because of it. I don't know, though. My question would be, does this throw more confusion into it? Immediately, it'd be interesting because they didn't say, okay, a temporary, this is a temporary restraining order or temporary injunction. This is a permanent injunction. Can still be appealed, but this stays, is what they claim. Now, I don't know if the appeals court can come in and reverse it. I don't know whether the Court on International Trade is the same as a district court. I don't believe it is in their power because they overlook international trade. They're not over a particular district. They're over international trade. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in there that interested me. Nothing else that I have seen yet. Not a lot of updating overnight. As I said, they have immediately appealed, and I don't know. I looked for any type of legal expert overnight that said, okay, what comes next in this and how long will it take? I don't know. But, yeah, the law that you had Trump surrogates relating to was, they said, well, he can do it. He's the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 makes it so he can do it. He can negotiate trade agreements, and including tariff reductions with other nations or tariff increases. And so, trying to think, does it say here? I'm reading it, an update from CQ Almanac Online Edition saying the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 granted the president authority to negotiate trade agreements, including tariff reductions with other nations. It says tariff reductions. It doesn't say increases. So I don't know. But it apparently does, the Section 232, because that's what they've used already. They've used that already to raise tariffs, so apparently they can. Because the court even said they use that section. That's okay. They went through the process. And that's a different process than Trump just saying 100% tariffs here, 50% tariffs here. It has to go through a Commerce Department investigation. So you've got the Trump surrogates out there stating that the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 grants them. The court should get out of the way, but that's not the law that the administration used. They use the IEEPA law. So, whew. It got to be like calculus earlier, trying to get through all the reasoning. I'll have to go through it again and read it. You know, I can speed read and get about, you know, what I call my own speed reading. I get probably about 70% of what is in a particular thing, and then I've read a number of articles in it, whether it was National Review, Wall Street Journal, CNN. I went to see how everybody was spinning it, and everybody seemed to come to the same conclusion as to what the court actually was saying. This doesn't seem to be as complicated as I thought it might be, but again, who knows? Who knows where it will go today and what arguments are given? I'm just going through the arguments or the debate points that I've seen up to this particular point. So we'll see where it all goes. But yeah, stock market up. Let me just very quickly go to CNBC and see where the markets, the Dow futures are, or the markets in general. Okay. It stayed roughly steady, anywhere between up 450 to 550 for the Dow. S&P up 1.52%, NASDAQ up 1.94%. This is the futures is up. So it stayed steady, though, when the announcement came out. It's not like it's skyrocketed out of control. And I think because there's still a lot of confusion. You really don't know. The other thing is, and the court did talk about it, they said the difference, because they brought up the Nixon tariffs and said, well, number one, they used a different law, but number two, the Nixon tariffs, Nixon said and wrote, these are temporary. And as the court pointed out, the tariffs, that law or that executive order lasted 4 months. They never implemented the tariffs according to the court. And there were very specific things. I think some of the things that might have hurt the administration is that is it a national emergency, or is it a way to raise taxes? Because the president came out and said, we're going to get rid of the income tax. So that's not about unfair trading practices at that point. That's a policy, and I don't know whether this influenced the court or not, but that's a policy to change the tax system. Did the court look at that and say, okay, there really isn't an emergency here? And they pointed that out, that where's the emergency where is the unusual? It has to be unusual and basically urgent emergency to use this bill, which does not include tariffs. Tariffs is not an action that's included in this particular bill. So it gets complicated as you get to this point. We'll talk more about it coming up. 866-90 Red Eye.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
A late May, full of stormy weather and slowed down farmer field work in much of the central and eastern U.S. Yet USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says,
now it looks like the pattern will be changing. We've got just another system or a system and a half to work through the system before the pattern changes.
so once a midweek system leaves the Atlantic seaboard and a late week storm departs from the Atlantic coast by early this weekend,
We will have had 2 weeks of very wet weather. I think for a lot of producers, it's a short-term annoyance because it's been a mighty struggle to get some of this planting done for corn and soybeans and cotton and other row crops. But in the end, this moisture will come back to be a big benefit as we move into the hotter and likely drier weeks ahead.
that warmer weather in the eastern two-thirds of the nation should develop as soon as early next week as a western heat wave moves along towards the Atlantic coast. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
And it's Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. He's Eric Harley. He has a morning off talking about the U.S. Court on International Trade stopping the majority of the Trump tariffs. Let's go to John in Tennessee. John, welcome. You're on Red Eye Radio. Hi, John.
Hey, how you doing? It's an honor. I'm trucking down the highway here, and I listen to you guys all the time, so it's an honor. I know you don't take many calls, and I'll get right to it. The kicker is I might not be able to hear your response because of my location, but the emergency, when it comes to emergencies and how, that's applied, wouldn't in the case of China, an emergency such as they handle or supply all of our antibiotics, that's not only an emergency, that's kind of foolish, correct? And how don't you think that would justify emergency? And I'll try to listen in.
Okay, no, it's a totally legitimate question, and I guess you could expand it even beyond that, and say if there's one country that you could look at, because stealing intellectual property that you could that the president could do something on, it would be China, and you are correct. What what I believe the court is saying, and give me a little bit of leeway here, a little bit of a break, because I've only scanned the entire decision, which is 50 pages during the show. But from what I get, the president could do it. He used the wrong law. And even you could see his surrogates were out there today saying the president has the ability to put tariffs on under the 1962 Trade Expansion Act. Yeah, and the court said that because the orders halts Trump's 30% tariffs on China, 25% on some goods imported from Mexico and Canada, and the 10% universal tariffs on most goods coming into the United States. It does not, however, affect the 25% tariffs on automobiles, auto parts, steel, or aluminum, which were subject to Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a different law than the one Trump cited for the tariffs. He used a different law. Under that law, it is the Commerce Department that does an investigation, because they view that unfair trading practices are happening, and they use that law. So he can do it, it seems. Now, you can't do it immediately and just, Monday it's 50%, Friday it's 10%, next Tuesday it's 110%. That you can't do. What they're saying is the president just can't do that. You need to, with cooperation of the Commerce Department, that's how you get it done that way. That's what Congress has done, through that Trade Expansion Act of 1962. And the surrogates agree with it, the Trump surrogates. I call them the Trump surrogates. I call the always Trumpers. He never does that. It's like there's the never Trumpers, there's the always Trumpers, and there's a ton of people in between that love what he does but don't agree with him 100% of the time. But, yeah, you're right. You could do it on China and succeed in doing it in China. It just might take longer than an executive order that can be done in one day.
listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And we are Red Eye Radio. Welcome and good morning. It's download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. It's going to be a very interesting day, I think, because I don't know what other precedent exists out there. Again, limited knowledge by just scanning the actual decision from the U.S. Court on International Trade, and then looking at the Trump surrogates out there and, what they're, saying these are rogue judges. And it's like, okay, they only exist for things on international trade. That's the only reason they exist. It's not like they're a district court only over a small thing. So that may be used by the administration. I don't believe that's going to be effective, the effective defense that these are rogue judges out there doing this, unless we find out, and I haven't seen it either from the left or the right, stating from either Democrats or Republicans, stating that the court has overstepped their bounds because of this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. It may exist. I haven't seen it yet, so it's going to be interesting to see, because I'm assuming both sides are going to come out with their best arguments tomorrow to the public, because this is huge news. It's huge news that the trade court has struck down the global tariffs. Now, to the last caller, you're right, because the first question would be, well, what do you mean? If why can't he take on China? He can. He just can't use this law to take on China, is what the court's saying. In fact, the Trump surrogates have said the same thing. Trump can increase tariffs. He's got it under the 1962 Trade Expansion Act. Yeah, but he didn't use that. And that's a longer process in order to do that. That doesn't happen overnight. And you go through the process through the Commerce Department to do that. From what I can tell, if the administration used that, and that might take more time, and I'm not sure the precise rules, but he might not be able to say it's a 10% tariff now I'm going to reduce it, now I'm going to put it back on, now I'm going to increase it to 90% or 200%, whatever. I don't know if he has the ability to do that under Section 232 of the 1962 Trade Act. So when you look at it, the court isn't saying he doesn't have the ability to do it, to put tariffs on. They said he doesn't have the ability to put these broad-based tariffs across the board using the IEEPA law. I don't know if he has the ability to do what he did under the 1962 law, but he does have the ability to put specific tariffs on. I don't know if that law gives him the ability to do the widespread across the board. The other thing is, when you talk about the emergency part of it, we talked about it earlier, whether he has the, what dictates emergency powers. Well, he has stated, for example, that, they put for example, tariffs went on Great Britain. Great Britain has a trade surplus. He has stated the problem is the trade deficit. Well, we have a trade surplus with them. So why are they included? And so that's what gets in. And as we've also said, the fact that it might have hurt him in this case, and I'm not sure if it did, but one of the things that came up for me is they're saying, well, it's got to be a specific emergency, and Nixon dictated this is the emergency, and the tariffs are, this is when he put them on in 71, 10% tariffs that the court said, he said these are temporary, and if these things are resolved, the tariffs end. Well, he never actually implemented the tariffs. The tariffs were never implemented according to the court. I tried to do some checking on it quick before the show, and I couldn't find that. So they have the ability to put tariffs on and to punish for unfair trading practices. It's just the judges seem to be saying this law doesn't give them the ability to do that. And the other thing is, when he talked about, and this is when, it was fentanyl, it was a way to get rid of the income tax. Well, a way to get rid of the income tax, the court might have looked at that and said, well, wait a minute, if you're trying to create tax policy through the executive branch, you can't do that. That's not an emergency. It may be a wish of yours, but you're not saying we're doing this to punish the country for unfair trading practices. You're saying the surplus, the deficit, trade deficit, the trade deficit is the emergency, but it's been going on for 51 years. 51 years we've had a trade deficit. When does that become an emergency? And then when you add the fact that we're not going to have to pay income tax anymore, which they promoted, we're going to get rid of the income tax, and it became, well, we're going to get part of the income tax. Then the questions came, well, wait a minute. Are you planning on taking the tariffs off? And then he said, no, the tariffs stay. The 10% is going to stay no matter what, unless you build everything in the United States. Well, they looked at that and said, well, that's an economic goal. That's not an emergency. That's an economic goal that you wish to have. And so I think that might be part of their thinking. Again, I'm not sure, but that's some of the thoughts that went through my head. Now, what happens when this gets to the Supreme Court? And this is where a couple of our great listeners sent in. They said, well, look at the EPA law. When Congress told the EPA that hey, you're the EPA, you can do stuff against pollution, they went after CO2. Well, the Supreme Court looked at it and said, and remember, the EPA is part of the executive branch, so you're looking at the executive branch making these decisions. The Supreme Court and most Republicans agreed with the ruling where the Supreme Court came back and said, look, just because your job is to ensure that pollution isn't there, you're the Environmental Protection Agency, you just can't say this CO2 is a pollutant. Now we're going to regulate these companies out of business unless Congress has told you you can do that. And in Congress, under the IEEPA, which does not say the president has the ability to tariff, under that law, under the 1962 law, he does, but that's a different process that he could not put in as quickly. He could do it under the 62 law, but there's nothing, and tariffs are included in that law. There's nothing about tariffs in the IEEPA law, so I'm thinking that that's what they're looking at. Looking at, when we go back here to that law that the Supreme Court might look at as precedent, we go back to, let me see, this would be June of 2022. Supreme Court puts the brakes on EPA in far-reaching decision. High Court says agency overstepped its authority in restricting greenhouse gas emissions in a ruling with ramifications for regulators, federal regulators. The Supreme Court ruled that federal regulators exceeded their authority in seeking to limit emissions from coal plants in a decision that sharply curtails the executive branch's authority to make policy actions on a wide range of issues without congressional direction. In a blockbuster 6-3 decision penned by Roberts, the court said the EPA had overstepped when it devised the Obama-era regulatory scheme known as the Clean Power Plan. The plan has been challenged by West Virginia and others. The court said that when federal agencies issue regulations with sweeping economic and political consequences, in this case, rules to address climate change, the regulations are invalid unless Congress has specifically authorized the action. A decision of such magnitude and consequence rests with Congress itself or an agency acting pursuant to a clear delegation from that representative body, the Chief Justice wrote, faulting the EPA for finding new powers in the vague language of a long extant but rarely used statute Beyond the EPA, the decision is likely to rein in President Biden's ability to use other departments and regulators such as the Treasury Department, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to address climate change, one of his signatory policy initiatives. And, of course, they have, Biden calling the court's ruling a devastating decision, which aims to take our country backwards. But it's clear what they meant. If Congress didn't put it in, if it's not specifically in there, you can't do it. And so if there's any clue, I don't know if they would extrapolate that out to this decision by the trade court, but what the trade court has shown is that the IEEPA law that the president used does not say he can use tariffs. He can freeze assets. He can do it. He can stop. He can just stop trade because it says imports and, imports and exports. He could stop. If there was a national emergency, he could say, sorry, we're not taking that anymore, this, or we're not shipping this to them. But it doesn't say he can do tariffs. And so under the other law, he can, but that would take longer. There's a process you have to go through, and I believe you probably have to go through country by country on that. And so this might have been a way to accelerate the process and make it more fluid where the president could use it as a bargaining chip. But this court, the federal trade court, does not believe that, well, I'm trying to use it as a bargaining chip to get a better, as you said, to get a better deal. They don't view that as a national emergency. So if there's a court and if there's a precedent, if they use this at the EPA law as a precedent, that would not be good news for the administration. If you can use it as a precedent, there may be something I'm not looking at where he can't use the EPA. Again, this all the top of our heads because this ruling came down. Well, when I woke up to come into the show is when I saw the ruling the first time. So as I said, during the commercial breaks, I read the entire 50-page decision, scanned it. I call it my speed reading during the commercial break. So we'll see what happens here. It's going to be a fascinating day, though, to see what happens because there's going to be probably some heated rhetoric and also some good legal background that I'm looking for on this. And then we'll see tomorrow whether we were close in our analysis of this or not. 866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. I'm Gary McNamara. Eric's out, but he returns Sunday night, Monday morning. So it's you and me again tomorrow. I don't know if I can handle this story. You've mocked them as mooches and mom's basement dwellers. They prefer the term stay-at-home sons, and they have a new hero in the new Jeopardy champion, Brendan Lau. Lau, 27, has a master's degree in political science, and judging by his quiz show performances, an expansive knowledge of everything from the Middle Ages to pop music. He won almost $60,000 in 3 contests that aired last week on Jeopardy! He's also unemployed and lives with his parents. At his request, Jeopardy! Host Ken Jennings introduced him at the beginning of each episode as a, quote, recent graduate and stay-at-home son, end of quote. I figured even if I lost my first game, at least I could help make people laugh. It worked. His self-deprecating humor made him an overnight legend on social media, where people say he is, like, pretty much living their dream. The phrase stay-at-home son was added to the Urban Dictionary in 2007 as an insult to be hurled at the unmotivated man-child. Lately, members of the generation that brought us quiet quitting and lazy girl jobs have embraced the label as an ironic badge of honor. I give up. I just give up. Hey, it's going to be an interesting day. It really is. I can't wait to get back on the air tomorrow. So much to talk about. How will the administration look at it? How will the legal experts look at the decision from this trade court to knock down the vast majority of the Trump across-the-board tariffs? We'll have all of that and more coming up on, I could say tonight, but it's actually tomorrow morning show.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.